This is an example of a layered score within FMOD Studio. FMOD Studio is a game audio engine that's basically a piece of middleware that works with the game engine. What we can do is we can set up a bunch of layers and we can import them into an event. The layers that I have set up here are loops 1 through 5, and they're all the same length. They came from a larger piece of music that I've put together. And what I'm trying to do is trying to trigger the different layers to go in alongside with the intensity in the game. So, for example, in loop 1, we just have some toms and a tom strike and some strings as our bed. This is going to be our neutral layer, so it doesn't need to be very exciting or anything like that. In layer 2, we add in a bit of chorus, and we also add in a bit more of percussion to sort of add a tiny bit of intensity and movement to the piece. In layer 3, we're going to add a little bit more percussion and some brass. We're at the halfway point here, so we really want to try to start to increase our intensity. You'll notice that each of these layers, you can tell the difference in the intensity. The other layer doesn't sound like the layer before it, or it doesn't sound like the layer after it, but they all introduce something to create one larger piece at the end. In layer 4, we add a bit more percussion, some heavier strings to really pick up the intensity of the piece a bit. And in layer 5, we go all out and we have some cymbal hits, we have some snare drum in there, some more brass, and heavier strings. Now all of these should work well together as one stereo file. But what we're going to do here is we're going to start off by playing our bass layer. Clicking play here is simulating how game audio would start to play within a game. It would trigger and say, at this point of the game, this piece needs to trigger. I've set up parameters 2, 3, 4, and 5. The parameters are basically a setup that's going to give data to the game engine. You can name them whatever you'd like, and you would work with your game audio programmer or your game programmer to set up what type of name and what type of values are needed for these parameters. So for right now, I'm going to name these intensity 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I'm going to add a 0 for minimum and a 1 for maximum, similar to values that we've used in Unity. When you look at intensity 2, you can see that I've set up a volume curve. The way that I set up the volume curve is by going into loop 2 on the timeline and adding automation. So when I have the automation here, what I can do is I can bring that piece of music in or out. So now that I have intensity 2 working, I want to show you how I go through intensity 3. I do the same thing. I've used the same volume curve. And the game audio data is being sent to the game engine, and it's going to say at this halfway point to bring in the additional tracks at the given decibel level. So I can do the same with 4 and 5 as well. Once I have all of the intensities set to 1, all of the tracks are playing, and you can see their meters all working. At that point, I can go in and I can remove any of them. So this is just track 1 and 5 playing right now. I can bring 4 back in. So we can really set this up to have the game engine trigger based on the intensity level of the game. Obviously, the intensity level will probably go up sequentially. So you would probably never go from intensity 5 and then have layer 3 still playing while layer 2 is not playing. But basically, what would happen is you would have, as the game progresses, intensity 2 would mean that, there's a few more enemy, or there's some enemy near, and, the player has to be a little bit warned by the music that something's going to happen. Intensity 3, maybe they're confronting some enemies. Intensity 4 could be, where even more enemies coming, and intensity 5 could be where you're just overloaded with enemy. And as the intensity goes down during the gameplay, those layers will be taken down, just the same way as they're brought up in the mix. That's just one of the ways we can do it. There's some other ways that we'll learn later on or we'll discuss later on, but I just wanted to give you an example of how some of these layer scores can be done within some middleware.